Well, Squibbon takes a different approach than the Rainforest Connection has for all these years, where we want to make sure there's a way in which the sound of nature can actually unveil nature to everybody, particularly consumer audience or just like homes, people's homes, their backyards, on their camping trips. You don't have to be a scientist or a conservationist necessarily to appreciate what's there. And because we're so good at listening with all the technology we built, we figured that we could take that data and not just make it possible to listen to it, but actually really pull out insights that matter to your life. We want to show that living in a place with greater biodiversity, with more animals passing through, actually improves the life that you yourself are familiar with, not just a conservationist or off in the middle of nowhere in nature.
Hello and welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast, where you'll hear conversations one after another that generate aha moments for you. There is an enormous wave of goodness and progress well underway in the world that almost no one knows enough about yet. It is so well hidden by the negative noise in our media that I'm calling that wave a conspiracy of goodness. Yes, it is still an amazing world out there. And on this podcast, we'll introduce you to the people making it that way. Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Linda Ulrich, founder of the mothership website of this podcast called The Goodness Exchange. That is a global website where you'll see countless articles that we've written, recordings, videos, and this podcast all about what's right with the world. Newsworthy things that are just not rising to the top of our feed. The purpose of this podcast and the Goodness Exchange is to put a spring in your step every day so you can live with less fear and far more joy. And we're going to get started on that right now with another amazing interview. Today we're going to speak with Topher White. Topher is a conservation technologist and the founder of an envirotech startup, one called the Rainforest Connection, which we have written about on the Goodness Exchange 3 times, and also a new project called Squibbon, which we're going to talk about today, that is just something I can't wait to connect with personally right here where I live. Topher is an inventor. He is a field engineer and a social entrepreneur, and he's been honored with so many titles. He's been a National Geographic Explorer, a Rolex laureate. He's the World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. I could go on. His parents must be very proud. And mainly, he has contributed to our world's understanding of the diversity that's out there. If we go and keep relying on what we can see via cameras, Topher was one of the great thought leaders in this field of, instead of looking for biodiversity, listening for it. And he's going to explain that in a lot more detail in a minute. But that's how I came to know Topher, was connection with this big global project that now is in over 30 plus countries. It's an idea where we listen for diversity in our environments and we can solve all kinds of problems, which I hope we'll talk about too. So today we're going to talk about that, but mostly we're going to talk about our own role in conservation and what we can learn about our own backyards and our neighborhoods. Squibbon, the company that we're talking about today, was founded in 2022 as kind of a technology version, or I think a technology extension of the Rainforest Connection, something that we can use in our own lives to be connected to what happens next, to have a sense of flourishing with the natural world around us, even if that's in cities. So that's the best I can do for now. You're going to understand Topher's work a lot better in a few minutes. I want to start by throwing a quote out there that made me think of Topher the minute I read it. It says, "The day before something is truly a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea." And I suspect that Topher White has had people think his ideas were pretty crazy. So welcome, Topher.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's great to be here with you, especially after so many years. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yes, we have. We met a long time ago, and we have been on the Rainforest Connection bioacoustic journey all the way along. So Topher, when you hear that statement, the day before something is truly a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea, what does that make you think when you consider the scope of time, 2013 when you started the Rainforest Connection, to what you're doing with acoustic technology now?
There's so many different ways to say that we're used to, right? And long after something is still still a crazy idea. Getting to the point that it actually works or is executed is sometimes quite a long road as well. So um, it's not just about the idea of being proved by its mere virtue or being proved by trying it the first time. Oftentimes, you have to get a little bit of encouragement to know that your idea isn't crazy enough. And besides, all the best ideas sound like really bad ones. You know, the ones that because the best ideas are high competition spaces, and the best ideas don't need a champion. They generally are ones that everyone can get behind. So you know, it's plenty of the crazy ideas are perfectly bad, but even the good ones, the best ones, still sound bad, I think.
Okay, so start us off on just give us the high points of this journey, because this is what I love about Squibbon, is that it starts out somewhere back in time when you found an amazing way to help scientists and people using data collect more knowledge than we were ever able to do. But now we're over here making something for the general public. So talk to us about that arc of time.
Sure. I mean, a lot of this came out of us listening to these remote places, rainforests, particularly for threat detection, was the original idea that we've talked about in the past. But then, of course, there's so much happening in these environments. Again, you can hear chainsaws, you can hear logging trucks, and hear gunshots, and you can mobilize people to go stop it. But again, there's so much more happening around the forest at all times. And what's happening there are the lives and the expressions of animals and the way in which they interact with each other, data that or information that you can't get from anywhere else. So we started listening to that and actually expanded the whole team to work around it and adopted new tools and new approaches. And Rainforest Connection has really taken a direction towards this term bioacoustics, listening to nature, ecoacoustics, as a way of understanding not just individual animals, but entire ecosystems and health and the changing planet itself.
Okay.
And that team is doing great work.
Well, I just thought of a course. We interviewed is Borhan the CEO now?
Yeah, Borhan is CEO.
Yeah.
Longtime COO, became CEO, and man, things took off from there.
Yeah, you will find an episode with Borhan Yassim. Probably episode around 120. We're going to put it in the show notes, the exact episode. But that was a great interview, and lots of folks have complimented your work and the way Borhan puts it. Mm-hmm. So we'll make sure people have a connection to that. And I should say right now that anything that Topher and I mention in this interview will be in the show notes, highlighted, so you can enjoy anything that he and I mentioned. But yeah, go on about your team there. That's been an extraordinary effort now, very, very global, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, we certainly did not come up with the idea of listening to nature on our own. That's been something that's been happening for many decades. I do think that we've really boosted it to new potential, especially with that team and the tools and the fact that we can mobilize a whole community. But within that comes this idea that of course the sound of nature, like the sound of our living planet, is possibly not just the best tool for protecting it, it's least utilized, but maybe like insights leads us into entire new understandings of nature itself and animals that you can't get from any other source. And that's what we began to sort of see from those soundscapes and the way they were being analyzed and who was using them. But throughout this time, it really did seem to us that there was an audience for this that we weren't able to reach with those types of tools. Although there's really few places on Earth that sound more vibrant and amazing than the rainforest. And I encourage everyone to go get the Rainforest Connection app off the app stores and listen to these amazing soundscapes. It sounds like nothing else. There was a whole areas that we weren't able to get to with this technology. They were much closer to people's hearts and closer to their homes. And that's what we decided that it was necessary for us to really sort of spin off a whole new team, a whole new organization to address this need.
Wow. Okay. Talk to us exactly about what Squibbon is going to bring to our neighborhoods and backyards.
Well, Squibbon takes a different approach than the Rainforest Connection has for all these years, where we want to make sure there's a way in which the sound of nature can actually unveil nature to everybody, particularly consumer audience or just like people's homes, their backyards, on their camping trips. You don't have to be a scientist or a conservationist necessarily to appreciate what's there. And when people think of nature and sound, they usually think of like serenity. They think of being able to listen in a sort of a Zen meditation approach, which is totally reasonable. But in fact, like what's happening in the sounds of nature are often things that we can't even hear. The subtleties of the way in which animals communicate with each other, the subtleties in which they actually assert themselves and express who they are through nature. And because we're so good at listening with all the technology we built, we figured that we could take that data and not just make it possible to listen to it, but actually really pull out insights that matter to your life and repackage them in ways that actually matter in your everyday life. Because we want to show that living in a place with greater biodiversity, with more animals passing through, actually improves the life that you yourself are familiar with, not just a conservationist or off in the middle of nowhere in nature. And that's actually quite a challenge to be honest, because we are taking a very solid scientific foundation. And again, I want to back up for a second and say that when we think, the way in which humans usually relate to the world, to each other, to nature, is visually, right? And that's beautiful. We have great eyes and we can see so many great things. But that's just a very limited approach to what's there. Of course, you can only see what's right in front of you. The same is true for a camera. And the truth is that you can only see things that are big enough to see. In nature, sound is a whole nother way for both tiny creatures and faraway creatures and hidden creatures and buried creatures to actually assert themselves and become part of the fabric. It's almost like the bright colors of a bird, except a little frog like this can be the brightest sound in the system. And so they almost compete for this the same way that we compete for attention. And so, there's so many things we can learn about nature in terms of how animals feel, how they interact with each other, who's the predator, who's the prey, the movement of animals through, and we're not limited to a scope that's like right in front of a camera. So you get this entire view of what's happening all around. And so sound is just such a powerful tool for this, even if us as listeners are limited. But when you take some really great technology and you put it in there and you can translate what's happening in the world, not just for us to be able to hear everything, but for us to be able to understand it, then some really great things come out of it. And, the real power comes when we start to attack applications and use cases on top of that.
There is this amazing wonder to be had in nature. It's not someplace, nature isn't someplace we have to go to. We don't have to get in a big vacation or buy all the gear and gear up to go somewhere. It's good enough right where we are.
I agree. I think that it's great for us to get out and see the different kind of nature that is in close enough for us to get to. But the best case scenario, I think we can agree, is one where nature overlaps with us quite a bit. And what we ought to be trying to find a way to encourage is this interspecies infrastructure that doesn't allow for like exclusionary corridors for wildlife to pass through, but allows wildlife to become a part, either the residents who stay in your backyard or stay around where you are, or your balcony or your roof, but the ones who can pass through quite unobstructed. And the truth is that there's lots of animals around here. They're really, really good at hiding themselves. You get this amazing footage of like mountain lions walking through neighborhoods at nighttime. My bet is that they're there 4 or 5 times more than they're captured on cameras. The animals are here. They're very good at not being noticed, but they notice us all the time, and they can tell us things about ourselves and each other that is really pretty exciting, even just to know about, whether you're a scientist or not.
Conservation seems like a big word. It seems like something that's happening out there in the world. Mm-hmm. But it is knowing what's in your backyard and knowing how good your neighborhood is doing. Talk to us about this localness of this effort.
Well, even in all the past 10 years of work in remote places like the rainforest, from indigenous tribes to local NGOs, communities, sometimes governments, and just local people, you realize that there's really like conservation, the best conservation, the only real conservation is local conservation. And that includes like the really faraway places. It doesn't matter if there's top down, like a government wants to protect a place, or if a person wants to protect something outside of the planet. If there's not someone there on the ground who's committed generation after generation for their own purposes, not just to, check a box, to preserving that place, that's the only thing that's going to allow us to keep it from being overrun. And that can be true right here as well. I mean, the United States as one great example, was massively deforested for hundreds of years. In fact, we are one of the few countries on Earth with like a net gain in forest cover, just based on the fact that we lost so much. And so this is a place with rebounding biodiversity. We would hope we have to do our best to make sure that the things we do don't change that. But that's not something just to be done at the state level, or governmental level, or even the corporate level. There's so much that you can do in your backyard, and not just because you want to be a conservationist, because we can make a case for why that makes your life more interesting and better. And we want to prove that with the whole product.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to learn all about the Squibbon and how it's going to make our life richer, to know a lot more about our surroundings. Hey, Dr. Linda here. Did you know that a recent Harvard study found that exposure to just 4 minutes of good news each day will make you 32% less anxious and 18% more optimistic? Just 4 minutes. We've all got that much time to devote to our worldview and our sense of flourishing. Yes, if you make a habit of learning about just one piece of remarkably good news each day, you can be the one in your circles with fresh insights, ideas, and a sense of strength. Okay, so that takes care of the problem in our personal lives. But what about our work environments? We need to feel like we come alive there, that we have meaning and purpose there. Well, enter the Goodness Exchange for business. For companies that want to create optimistic and values-driven work cultures, our content can give you a way to turn aspirational ideas like positivity into a concrete way of being in the workplace. In fact, employee retention and attraction may depend on your company's ability to nurture a tone of innovation, interesting collaborations, and possibility. And most importantly, the Goodness Exchange can meaningfully elevate your company's wellness efforts and benefits packages, because your work culture can be offering employees something new, peace of mind, and that sense of flourishing I mentioned before, where employees' well-being isn't just a perk, it's the way we care about the individuals in our workplaces. So if you'd like to chat about infusing your culture with a tone of celebration, about goodness and progress, we'd love to chat. Contact our CEO, Liesl. Her email address is info@goodnessexchange.com. Thanks. Okay, we're back with inventor, engineer Topher White. He's using technology and the data that we get from what we can hear in our environment to solve problems like illegal logging, loss of biodiversity. And now his project Squibbon is aimed at making our shared future more hopeful right where we are, right in our own neighborhoods from a conservation standpoint. So Topher, let's start there with this. Talk to us about Squibbon. Who's it for first, and then what does it do?
Thanks. I mean, so Squibbon is for everybody. It's for the people with homes, with balconies, with anything that allows you to interface remotely with nature. And you'd be really surprised how that's almost everybody on Earth, to a certain degree. So it all starts with us the understanding that we need everybody, including consumers, to be a part of the conservation efforts. And they can up the ante on so much more. So it begins with this device here called the Delta, which we're launching on Kickstarter just this month. Please join us. This is a sort of next generation listening device and sort of outdoor computer. It's a smart home for the outdoors, for your backyard. It's got all sorts of features that we can't get into right now, but some of the most important involve these microphones in all directions, which can hear things up to 5 times higher than people can, an extraordinary sensitivity. It listens for all the animals and analyzes this. It's when you set it up on the ground, you take your phone and you take a quick little panorama of your backyard so the device actually knows where it is and what's around it, because it recognizes the trees, the bench, the door, person. Install it right there. Then it'll be able to tell you when animals show up, whether it's on the oak tree, whether it's at the bench, whether it's near like the entry gate, whether it's on the wall of the house. It'll actually be able to tell you about that, with the idea being that you can get both real-time alerts for what's there. You can take these highlights of what's happening in your backyard. Would say that the blackbird lands on a tree, clearly has some kind of interaction with the skunk on the ground. These are things that we're able to pick out and make clear to you. But we're trying to make a case for why that on its own, if you don't happen to be a citizen scientist or a bird watcher, might not be enough. So beyond that, we are taking a dive into almost the surreal, the imaginative, to understand that the best way to interface with that data, with the bioacoustic scientific foundation that we've laid, is to tell stories. So when an animal comes into your backyard, you have the opportunity to name it. You have the opportunity to name any new individual animal that comes to your backyard as the device picks it up. And then that becomes the characters and stories that you're able to then tell and retell and re-render based upon your experiences. And there's an AI built into this entire Squibbon system that makes that possible. So again, imagine that your entire backyard from the point of view of this device, and we'll send some screenshots to everyone to see. is almost like a canvas that's been re-rendered in the style of your favorite poker story. As the animals come through, they will be superimposed onto that with the sounds, and we will actually begin to retell the relationships between the animals as they come through, and it changes every day. But this is all based upon real data. So when you are reading to your kid at night or your child at night, you can say, you actually are retelling stories, or the AI is retelling stories with imagery based upon the real interactions of animals in your backyard. And you can inject morals, you can inject lessons, you can inject all these things into that, and it gets re-rendered based upon all of that. And then, of course, because we have great technological resources at our disposal, that's just for the children. Then you walk into the next room with your partner or your friend, and you're able to see the exact same data retold in a mystery, noir, romance, comic book style, because your entire backyard becomes recreated within that style. These are things that are available to us that are currently being used for filmmaking, for storytelling, and all the rest. We want to actually build a whole imaginative AI world, which is seated upon nature. So nature is both the inspiration and the guiding factor for artificial intelligence, as it creates a new way for us to relate to the animals that are there. So when you look out your window and you see the skunk, you're like, oh, that's Wally. He's always getting into trouble with Gretel, who's over on the tree. And these are entirely legitimate ways, we think, to appreciate nature, but frankly, a little bit out there, you know, but very much of our time, I would say.
I totally think so. Now, don't you have the scientists going, what?
Well, it's important to point out that this is all based upon legitimate scientific data.
Yes.
Like this is what allows us to do this, because in order for us to say that this artificial intelligence these neural networks are based upon real animals, comes from the scientific basis. But yeah, I'd say that but that's part of the point. The point is for us to get creative with what's there, because it's storytelling and character building and imagination that is probably has a longer historical and prehistorical basis for our relationship to nature than solid scientific facts. And you can tell this anytime you get with indigenous communities, or you look at storytelling in mythology. The way in which we relate to nature is not always us versus them, or us apart from them. Usually there are very rich relationships that are steeped in things that you'd be hard pressed to find a scientific basis for, but which have lasted for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and might lead to the most harmonious relationship.
Yeah, and storytelling is how we really remember things, deeply remember things.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay.
But here's what's wonderful about this is that it's normal for us, I think, to be a little wary about what's happening with artificial intelligence right now. But what people sometimes can't necessarily what I find doesn't come up with conversations is the way in which AI is very personalized. There's an opportunity for this to be yours. And what this comes is an extension of your senses. We want to make sure that what this is doing is finding the right way that you are going to find the best connection to the animals or the people or the rest that are around you. And this will accentuate that to actually build that sense of ownership, build that sense of belonging, and build frankly, an understanding of the behavior. Because if there's a pattern to the way in which animals go through your backyard and interact with each other and your family, that doesn't need to be laid out in a data sheet or a sense of trends or a graph. It can be retold to you through stories that allow you to remember it, like you said.
And I think there's something about appreciating what's happening right here, something surprising, something remarkable, and being able to share it at work the next day, or at school, or what have you. Like, we had no idea we had bobcats in Vermont, and saw one recently crossing the road. We didn't really think there were bears where we live in Vermont, and one completely took down our bird feeding apparatus, which was a giant welded operation that I put together. And so we're getting these little glimpses. We're getting the damage control. We have beehives on our farm, and the beehives get disrupted. We say it's a bear, we're not there. And it seems like if it wasn't only the disruptions, if a dog gets sprayed with a skunk, right? This is how we know the wildlife is out there. But those are all sort of on the negative or losses side.
Hmm.
And I suppose this gives us an opportunity to see nature without being a part of their story. You know what I'm saying? Like just
Absolutely.
as they are.
You're right. And storytelling brings so much of a personal connection to them. I mean, how many amazing videos are there on the internet of dogs making terrible messes? If you discover the mess and you don't get to see how it happened, it's a lot less of interesting and it's a lot less endearing. Um, I do think that could be true. I mean, and we have to understand that animals are going to be themselves. We're not
Right.
going to change their behavior. They are going to take down your
Yeah.
bird feeder. I'm sorry about that. Um, but that's a bear being a bear, and you know what?
Yes.
That can be interesting and charming and just part of appreciating bears.
Yes.
Um, and you know what? It might be such a bummer because you missed it. Watching or seeing it be partially be told could could almost validate the outcome. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a way in which I don't see much of an issue in allowing people to relate to nature in ways that are more personal to them. There is no wrong way to appreciate
Mm-hmm.
animals and nature itself.
Mm-hmm.
Anthropomorphication may not help us understand scientific insights, but it can definitely help us understand um, why we wish they were around. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yes,
and
yes,
that's what we
yes.
definitely want to lean into.
I didn't mean to give those examples from a negative angle. It's just that
That was fine.
I live in a very rural area where, that's how wildlife is often spoken about, is about the
Mm-hmm,
damage control
mm-hmm.
afterwards. But often, once in a while, someone, as you pointed out, will get to be privy to something in the natural world that's beautiful. And yeah, you might have a cleanup afterwards, but it feels more fun. It feels more. There's a lot more wonder in it if you actually get to come upon it yourself. And that's what I understand this device allows us to do. We put it on our transom in the city, or it can be a city or a country piece of equipment, right?
Yeah, it can even be a hiking equipment. Again, it's got batteries. It can last for a while. It's got solar panels that they snap on, which you can show. Um, I mean, again, can think of it more less of a listening device, more like a backyard computer. It's a hub for any number of things, including eventually cameras. Um, the the whole point is that this is a way in which understanding nature in any sort of given environment, on or off the grid. And you know, it uses AI that's been developed over many years to be able to do that. And and we're exciting because this is just the start. This hole right in the middle isn't just decorative. It's where you will end up adding all sorts of accessories, including
Mm-hmm.
cameras and other sorts of devices. And of course, on the back, lots of technical plugins and stuff. But yeah, that's the idea. You take it with you,
Okay.
and over time, you will get better and better at understanding nature, and making it clear to you.
Because
Whether you want alerts for birds or whether you want stories about them.
now there's a bigger picture here too. Is there some data collection going on that will be helpful in the scope of time?
Yeah, again, the first interface that you get here is all about being able to listen and experience nature that's there. Get highlights of, because again, if you listen just to what's happening around you, the moment from moment to moment is not always that exciting. But we can take 24 hours of amazing wildlife insights and compress that into 2 minutes of actual pretty legitimate drama, and that's your kind of report that you can listen to today in spatial audio. Then, of course, you can visualize that right on the screen in all the ways that's happening, not just where the animals are, but the explosions of sound and what they actually mean. Um, there's the storytelling layer. And then for citizen scientists or scientists themselves, all of this connects back into the amazing platform, Arbimon, which I know Borhan spent some time talking to you about,
Mm-hmm.
um, that is just the foremost ecoacoustic platform on the planet. So if you actually did want to dive into legitimate scientific work, it's all right there. And so we want to take what is a global project like that and make it and concentrate all of those insights locally so that you can learn the most about what's happening right around you. And we're going to throw all these different things out there because we know that there's going to be an audience for each one of them,
Oh,
and we'll try some more stuff too.
it's super. Okay, so one thing that you pointed out to me, which I hadn't really thought about, is that nature is different once we're there.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, we're gonna get an opportunity here to understand what's happening without our impact on the outcome. Every time we take a step in the woods, the animals saw us coming, you know, a mile
Mm-hmm.
ahead, and they're gone, or they're certainly not acting natural. So I love this 2 minutes of wonder that we could be thinking about the rest of our day. Talk to us about what you know about how this primes the pump of our imagination, or any of the thought that is gone into this.
Well, I think that so once we walk outside, it changes. Things change. Some animals might not care. Other ones care quite a bit. And so if you want to know the most of what's happening, the best is to put a wall between you and what's outside. Now, it feels like you can't experience that, but we're there to show and to prove with this product that you can relate to it even in even more exciting potential ways than if you were outside. We're not trying to keep people from going outside, but if you go outside, just know that it's going to be a little bit different. And we don't want that to be the only way for you to experience what's there. This just between me and this wall, we're talking like 10 feet at the most device out there. I can tell you that when I'm out there, I don't see that many birds right in the middle of San Francisco. But over the course of a day, sometime anywhere from 10 to 15 different species of birds can pass through this area. And with the device, we know exactly where they are. Very hard to capture them by camera, right? Because they're little birds and right there. But this thing knows what's there. So the idea is to our relationship and experience of nature should not be limited to what's right, what we have to walk outside to see. And we want to make a case for why you don't have to, and it can be even better and more experiential if you don't go outside.
So you were telling me a little story about the skunks that
Oh,
you
yeah.
knew.
Well, yeah.
Talk to us
Well, I mean,
about the skunks.
just I think it was like there's a sense there's so many animals around us. I don't expect many people to share this with me, but I do think rats are pretty amazing animals. I've had many pet rats over the years, and they're one of those animals that reliably shows up everywhere you go. Every city on earth, every boat, every anything has them around. And so within them, there's so much personality, but they're very good at like not being noticed most of the time, except when they're so brazen, which again, I think can be kind of charming too. But let's look at a skunk, something that we normally would try and keep our distance from. They're all over the place. Again, right in the heart of San Francisco, you'll see skunks and raccoons all over the place. There was I was watching a skunk the other day, kind of like how, by the way, when they bounce down the road, it is just so cute, bouncing down the road. And every single time someone would walk out their door, it's happened a couple times, the skunk would just like duck behind and walk outside, get their mail, walk back inside. These people came within a couple feet of running into the animal a couple of times, and they never knew. You have to imagine that happens almost every time we walk outside. And this device will help us make sure that we don't miss those things.
And then I want to say, you mentioned rats, just so people know. There is an episode that will have broadcast by the time this episode comes out. It's episode number 131 with Dr. Cindy Fast on this podcast. She's the director of training for an organization in Africa that's training giant pouched African rats to clear the whole country of Mozambique of landmines, which of course is a giant leap for humanity. Also search and rescue in rubble and the detection of tuberculosis before it spreads in communities. So there's a lot going on here in animal sciences and the superpowers of animals that we can discover through this, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, I can go on about rats for a while, but just there's few animals that know us better, and there's few ones that kind of reflect back on us in so many ways. But when it comes to ecoacoustics, or even listening, or even citizen science, there's so much that's focused on birds, and that's great because birds are very much under threat. They need to be protected. They need to be understood and appreciated. But there's so many other animals that I think are just as exciting. Frogs, amphibians, the mammals that are there, the insects that are there. What's great is that they are vocalizing. Sometimes, especially for amphibians, sound is like the way in which they assert themselves, right? So the noises they make are otherworldly, and within there, there's so much intent. That's what we want to make available to people, because we can tell you which birds come through. We also want to tell you all the other animals throughout it, and that's based upon the insights that are showing up on the amazing platform that I mentioned earlier, and all the work being done by scientists. All of that insights goes into the detection on this device and the platform.
I was thinking the other day after we spoke that a lot of this kind of the wonder that I see in your project comes from sort of a step-by-step orientation to the things that are not obvious to us. I can't remember who turned me on to it, but you and I have spoken about the app called Merlin, put out by
Really?
the Cornell Department of Ornithology.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just this morning I left it on my. I was sitting listening to the birds wake up in the morning 5:45, and I left the my recording on and went and got a cup of coffee. By the time I came back, there were 31 birds
Well,
that it recorded in about 7 minutes. It's 31 different birds, and many of them had the little red symbol, which means rare, and or a little half red symbol that means uncommon. And how would I have ever known that or known to appreciate?
mm-hmm.
I suddenly looked around my yard and all the mowing seemed, or the weeding, or
Mm-hmm.
the culture, that how much gardening we do and the bees and everything, all seemed like work and kind of like a job well done. Didn't seem like work anymore because I can appreciate that those 31 species are here in some small bit because my husband and I have protected the end of this dead end road we live on from housing developments and everything else. But this is for the housing developments.
True.
This
I
is
mean,
for everyone. I mean, nature has a way of finding its role in our surroundings, right?
yeah. Well, even the name like Delta for the device is intended to is there to point out the fact that we are going to be measuring animals biodiversity over time. We're going to be rendering that to you in all sorts of ways. But as you're there to measure biodiversity, what we would like to see is a positive change. And the only way to allow for that is for you to be able to, in your own experience, track the changes in animal presence, which we can suggest to you based upon the changes that are made to your own environment. So it's not a static checklist where you said, okay, we know these birds are here. What we want to do is be able to get so detailed with this because we're listening all day long, and just to birds, by the way, or just to animals, by the way, not just birds. The that you can make these changes based upon your own judgments and feedback, and suggestions can come from the community. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's we're not trying to say we're not trying to pass judgments on the way in which people ought to develop their homes. We're there just to offer feedback on what has or hasn't worked, and that could be for gardening, it could be for landscaping, it could be for home renovation, um, or it could be for simple things like leaving a fence up and down or putting the right kind of bird feeders in place. Um, there's so many ways people can do it. I did want to mention because it kind of sort of came up privacy. So again, for so long we've been focusing on listening to the really remote places around the world, and there's not many people there, and so privacy isn't much of an issue unless you happen to be a logger, in which case we were hoping to catch you. Um, the Now that we're like very close to people's homes, privacy matters a great deal. That's seriously baked into this device. So it's only listening for animals. We are actively making sure that we don't capture any human voices. The moment human voice is caught, it doesn't even get analyzed. It just gets thrown away. And then we'll also be working to drown out the sounds of cars or dogs barking or things like that the people may not want in their soundscapes, so that we can really make sure that you get the best experience out of what's in your space.
Ah, lovely. I hadn't even thought of those aspects
Yeah,
of it.
privacy matters a good deal.
Yes, of course. So, how does this interspecies infrastructure concept work in here? I'm not familiar with this.
Well, I didn't come up with this term, but I will say that it's one that I really very much believe in. Uh, there's different ways to approach conservation. One of them is to leave pristine wild places alone. That's certainly very important. Um, Another way is the sort of overlapping that you see in the sort of conservation that takes place from people actually existing on those landscapes. And then the other is finding the right way to both not just limit, but frankly like redesign our own landscapes, like suburban landscapes, rural habitation landscapes, even cities. There's a lot of biodiversity that can exist and pass through these cities. I think a lot of us see them all the time, and we want to be able to create data and tooltips to allow people to be a part of that. And I think that people will be. Look, I mean, people have dogs, cats. I'm not sure whether people are the type that would put cats outside, but if in any case, if you have pets, it is useful to know when certain predators are around. That does not mean that you should be keeping the predators out or poisoning the rest because they're an important part of the ecosystem. But For example, Borhan, he was talking about the prevalence of coyotes in his neighborhood in Texas, um, and how important it is that his amazing, wonderful dog um, isn't out at the same time as the coyotes. It turns out that animals are creatures of habit, and so if you're able to understand when they're going to be there and when they aren't on a regular basis, you can feel a lot more confidence in allowing them there and not feel like that's a constant threat to the things that you feel a great need to protect. And so that's the infrastructure that we're talking about. The more we understand each other, the more we can sort of peacefully and harmoniously coexist. And so that is I think knowledge, insight, and frankly, um, the room for adaptation is a very important part of this interspecies infrastructure that we talked about.
I think that brings me to something you said the other day that I've thought about a few times since you said it. You said there's no evidence that the best harmonious relationship with nature is literal.
Yeah.
What do you
Um,
mean by that?
I believe that. I think that I'm not even sure that the best harmonious relationship between each other is literal. The way in which we hold each other is often idealized or frankly learned, I guess. But
Okay.
when it comes to nature, look at indigenous tribes, for example. This came from one of my great friends and mentors, Liliana Horgui in Netherlands. She she was explaining to me when she was first hearing this idea, and again I was thinking about for children's stories, and she says, no, 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 this is actually pretty normal for everyone, everything from adults, indigenous communities, to relate to nature in this way. Even the jaguar, which has this almost mythical, godlike presence in these areas, the stories that people have that relate them to the jaguar and to all of nature is not based upon checklists of the behaviors of it. It's based upon stories that can date back generations and all the rest. There's no sense that our sense of greatest harmoniousness is is based upon direct observation that can be rigorously held up. It's based upon an understanding and an imagination that we hold far more dear and we personalized in our own way.
And don't you think the storytelling in this idea, Topher, also makes me think that it's a way to make nature relevant to people who aren't seeking it yet as a source of whatever comfort, wonder, expansive
Yeah.
ways of thinking about your role in the big picture. Like, can we can't make nature lovers out of people, but we can
Hmm.
certainly use this to introduce people to the world around them.
I think part of the reason for this whole new project, Squibbon, is around that. It's like if if we're going to get more people on board with nature, it can't be through the same sense of values, um, because we have to assume that everybody out there is good and they're trying to do their best. They just have different values and different ways of living their life, and that's we have to make a case through creativity and through a product that nature makes that life easier and better. And I think that we can and that we will. Um, it's I don't think it's obscene to claim that somebody who hasn't spent their life valuing nature or isn't convinced that it's there, um, should we should make a case for them to that nature is useful in their everyday lives. That's not something that arrives naturally because nature isn't made for us. It's frankly not. Like we exist within it, especially in our modern area. It's not made to make what we do any easier. Um, but that doesn't mean that there aren't tidbits that we can magnify within it that can largely improve someone's personal mission and experience. But it's risky, right? Because these are all new ideas. Some are going to work, so other ones aren't. And we want the new ideas that are here. Just know that it'll always be based upon real, rigorous data and using the community to help us push the envelope forward. Because if we can take conservation technology as we are and put it into a consumer space, we will up the ante on the quality of all the work we do across the whole gamut. Um, you know, multiple times, because there's just no more of a there's no more of a meat grinder than the consumer market. Like people will make us build this stuff well and make us execute well, and when we do, we hope that helps out conservation as a whole.
And you are capturing a moment on this earth
Mm,
for future genius. For
yeah.
for as genius as we think the Rainforest Connection idea was, and I hope people will look that up. We'll link to the articles that we have about the Rainforest Connection, which is a whole another level of genius. But there's going to be future geniuses, and you're collecting and keeping a record of this moment on the earth for all that's possible, right?
I do think that's really, really important. I think that we have a history in humanity. Problems, genius usually arises when it's required or when it's needed, or at least it's most appreciated when it's required and needed. And it's usually just at the last possible moment. It's why conflict and pressure often leads to things, but frankly, so does capability. So there's how many geniuses are there on this earth who don't have the means, the ability to build or to create what we need them to, just based upon being stuck in poverty or in the wrong place at the wrong time. But also, like, the wrong time can be a part of that. So if we understand climate change not as a cliff but as a slope that we're sliding down, and this changing over decades and centuries, it's very important that the geniuses of decades or even hundreds of years from now will have access to these insights of biodiversity. Because again, I also think there's genius in every species that exists on Earth, I would hope. Maybe not cognitive, maybe not extraordinary cognitive skills, but in their like generation upon generation of adaptation and the way they relate to the rest of the world, how much genius is baked into that evolutionary process that we can only pick out through behaviors that are attracted to ecoacoustics. That's something that I would hope we should make available in high definition, in en masse, to the questions that scientists and curious people will have in the future. And this is the moment for us to capture it, because there will never be another moment in the history of humanity, in the future history of humanity, where we have as much biodiversity as right now. And there's never been a moment in the past history of our species where we've had this much pressure on biodiversity. And I believe it's under pressure that these sort of extraordinary behaviors within species, between species, express themselves. And so this is the moment that must be captured, for other future people to study and potentially to find solutions that we won't have the imagination for right now, nor the tools. But in the future, we got to make sure they have the data,
So what does the future look like where this succeeds beyond your wildest dreams? Like, what could that future look like?
I think we want people to begin to view nature the same way that they view almost the electricity and utilities of their house. We want this to be intertwined in a way where, if you want to know what's happening outside, you just got to read the transcript of what the crows were talking about. These are things that, what happened last night? Where did I drop my keys? When did the neighbor get home? Chances are we want there to be a case for this real sort of integration between species and between biodiversity and humanity in any particular level that allows these things to be pulled out. So when we sort of reach that, and that use case is those use cases are solid, then I think this really can grow. And of course, within that, that's not the only way you can relate to nature, right? Any more than the only way you appreciate your coworkers is for their particular role in your company. The extent to which you appreciate them as people and what they add to an overall sort of goal, that's what we want to make nature. We want nature to be our collaborators in improving our lives, whether it intends to be that way or not. But we have the tools to turn it into that for ours without changing nature itself.
What has to happen next to get there? Like, for this to reach its fullest potential, what do you think has to happen next?
Well, I mean, for us, we need people to come get the product, get the delta, become a part of this early group, and really give us feedback. Things are accelerating so fast on the technological front, and on the data front, that we need people here to make sure that we are building the right things for you and for the future. So please come join us. I mean, it's really exciting. It's a very, very affordable product, and you'll be part of a really select group at the beginning. So
tell us more about the Kickstarter. I'm going to be your first buyer, test supporter, rating fan.
Yeah.
We'll find out what's happening right here in this yard.
Nice.
So
well, I mean, this is the device. This is the device. Comes in all sorts of beautiful colors, more than just these two. But yeah, it's made of aluminum. We're trying our best to minimize the amount of plastic that goes into this. It's less than 1% plastic by weight. It's an amazing device with all sorts of connectivity that we won't get into right now. But yes, it's $299 on Kickstarter, and that comes with all sorts of extra accessories that you might want. You can take it anywhere. The apps are free. Please join us. Come to squibbon.com and check out our Kickstarter campaign, which will run through June. So we'll hopefully be part of it, and then we will communicate with you all through the way. And you'll get the first ones will get their devices by July to be able to make the most of the summer months. But don't wait. Wait. Get out there and get it. Yeah.
No, we
But
won't.
it's really just a start. Imagine if all the insights that you have around your health, your body, and your own house became accessible through the backyard, but not focused upon people's presence there, focused upon the animals and what they have to do. Every single animal that's there is another set of eyes and ears, and oftentimes they're talking about it, and we can feed that right back into your experience of what's there, and hopefully one day be able to understand it that much better.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So big picture, Topher, from your wonderful career in conservation and as a change maker, if this interview had only been 2 or 3 minutes long, what do you really wish people knew? Sometimes you might watch the news or overhear a crazy conversation in a restaurant at the next table. Is there ever something that you say to yourself, oh, if people only knew what?
I think it comes down to understanding that there's no wrong way to interpret the world, as long as you're willing to accept different kinds of inputs, and you're aiming for a positive outcome for more than just yourself. And I'm thinking primarily about nature. Don't let someone tell you the right way to be the thing that you've decided to be. Don't let someone tell you that there's a wrong way to look at it. And make sure you're spending time around people who are not trying to discourage you from trying the things that you think are great. And then make sure that you still share the great things you build with the ones who thought it was a bad idea in the first place, because they'll be very happy to see it too. I think that I don't necessarily excel in like communicating my vision to other people sometimes, and it's usually not even all that visionary. It's usually pretty mundane. But it's really wonderful to know that occasionally people like what's there, and anything that we do that you just keep for yourself is ultimately not that much fun. Validation and sharing. Validation, we consider validation to be the negative way of looking at it. Sharing is the better way of sort of expressing it, I would say.
Yeah, and I have to say that's what has drawn me to your work from the very beginning. You're such a humble innovator, creative person. You've always just had that putting your ideas out there, and you've always had the ethos that people can improve your way of thinking. That's one of the reasons why I'm in such a support of this new Squibbon project, is because I see it has a way to connect us all of us.
Really hope so. But it's not up to me to decide what that connection is. I can try something, but please take it and then run with it, and then tell us what we do make do better, right?
Yes, yes.
We don't want to foist any vision of nature onto the world. We just want to get it. We just want to get a head start.
Oh, Topher, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your time and ideas with us again.
Yeah, thanks for blasting this idea out. I appreciate it.
Well, the Goodness Exchange is there for more conversations like this, all the amazing ideas of folks who are changing our shared future. I hope all the connections to goodness and progress that we've talked about here will carry you through your week, and you'll find a lot of the wonder and joy that Topher and I have been talking about. Thanks, Topher.
Thank you. Thanks so much, and thanks to the audience. Appreciate it.
Okay.